So here we are. Great. So everyone, enjoy your session with Claudia. Claudia, I'll be here if you need me, okay?
Thank you very much. Yes. So once again, good morning to everybody. I've seen people from Peru, Argentina, and other places in Latin America. So that's good morning to you and me. It's good afternoon for those of you that are in Europe, India, Indonesia. I've seen so many places. It's lovely to have you all. Thank you for being here, and a very special thank you to Melissa, who's going to be my partner in crime, and Paul, who's also another partner in crime backstage. And yes, we are going to be assessing cookies today. And the title of my presentation is inspired by something that I heard Professor Gavin say in one of the courses that he taught. I thought it was intriguing, and as Paul said yesterday with Annie, and as Melissa just said now, the fact that it is intriguing may have made you come, and that's great. That's part of the purpose of calling it How to Assess a Cookie, but also because I think that the idea of being able to assess anything by using scoring rubrics, cookies, pop bands, video games, anything that we want to assess, getting this idea that we can develop scoring rubrics and that they will be a useful tool can help us see the whole picture. So let's get started with my first question to you in the next slide. And thank you very much to those of you who replied to our survey. That gave me a lot of important information. It was actually formative assessment because it told me a lot about the things you already know and what you want to learn. Let's start off with a very basic question. What is assessment? How do you define assessment? And it doesn't need to be it can be a very complex, sophisticated reply. It can be, please don't Google. It can be a definition you already know, but it can also be a very personal definition. And since Melissa is helping me with the chat box, with the slideshow, I can keep an eye on the chat box, and I can see already that, oh, this one is great, to see if students are learning. That was one of the replies. To readapt, that's a great way to define it. So what is assessment? How do you define it? To check progress, that's another purpose. Great. It's evaluation of students' level of knowledge, measurement of learning outcomes. Oh, I'm so glad that you mentioned learning outcomes. I'm also going to call them aims or learning objectives. They are not synonyms exactly, but I'm going to use them interchangeable. Yes, Vanur, thank you for your reply, and lovely to see you here. To check progress, Christian, thank you. To promote learning, fantastic. Yes, where the learners stand. Oh, this is connected also with something that Annie said yesterday. A very simple definition of assessment is finding out where we are, where we want to go, how to get there. Great. Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for your participation. And in the next slide, I'm going to share with you a definition that I personally like. It's not the best definition. It's just as good as all the other definitions that you have given. It's from the Glossary for Education Reform. And I like it because I think that it's very easy to use for the assessment of cookies or other things. The wide variety of methods or tools that educators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skill acquisition, or educational needs of students. In this definition, which are the words that you consider the key words? Which are the words that you feel are right on target, or maybe some words from my definition that surprise you or that you hadn't thought about. Can you write them in the chat box? Progress. Orlando says progress. Wide variety, evaluate, tools, skill acquisition, learning progress. Thank you, Christian. Needs, skill acquisition. Oh, interesting. This is an interesting experiment. As you can see, the words that we pick are different because the words that resonate with me might be different from yours since we have different backgrounds, or since we were thinking maybe about something more specific or more general. Academic readiness, that's another one that, okay, great. So I have highlighted some of the words that resonate with me, and you will see them in the next slide. Wide variety is something that resonates with me because it gives me the idea of all the different methods and tools that we use to assess. What are the tools or methods that you use to assess? Once again, can you write them in the chat box? What specific methods or tools do you use in your classes to evaluate? Questioning, that's one, fantastic. Quizzes, yes. Presentations, traditional tests, everyday activities, monitoring, project, observation, group work. You see how this is a huge list. It is a wide variety, or representations, portfolios, and the answers keep coming in. Thank you. That's great. Absolutely. It's a very wide variety of things that we use. Another word that I have highlighted is document, because I feel that this is and needs, because I think that those are words that can be used for anything we want to assess, including cookies. So let's see how this translates. This definition translates into assessing cookies. We are using a wide variety of methods and tools. Tasting the cookies might be one, but not the only one. We use these techniques to evaluate, to measure, and document. In this case, it's not the educational needs of students, but it may be the needs of bakers and industries. So I hope you're beginning to see how the analogy of assessing cookies can work well in our educational context and any other context. So let's take a look at our next slide, because now that we have a working definition, we are going to quickly review some of the things that Annie Altamirano said yesterday and to compare them with what assessment for summative assessment is. So in these two columns, we have assessment for formative purposes on the left and assessment for summative purposes on the right. As Anne said yesterday, formative and summative are not labels. They are the purposes of all the assessment tools that we use. So although we all say formative assessment and summative assessment, the technical way to refer to them is assessment for formative purposes or assessment for summative purposes. So how does it work? First of all, the reasons why we assess formatively: to provide feedback and guidance for the purpose of, and this is my favorite highlighted word, improvement. It's to find out what needs to be changed to achieve the learning objective. You mentioned the learning objective in my first question, and I said that I was going to interchange. Sometimes I will be saying learning objective, sometimes A, sometimes outcome, but we know what we mean. Assessing formatively is to make decisions during the process. And that's why this is done before the end of the activity, of the year, of the unit, and it's done as often as possible. Assessment for summative purposes instead is used to determine the value of something, and the learning objective is also important, but what we are deciding is how effective it was. And we still make decisions, but we make them about the future and not during the process. So that's why assessing summatively is done at the end of the process or unit or task, and it's only done a few times during the school year. But I know what you're thinking. I think you know what you're thinking. Let's see if I kind of predicted your thoughts by taking a look at my next slide, in which we still talk about formative and summative purposes, but where you may be asking, okay, but where are the cookies? Well, doesn't assessment for formative purposes also apply to cookies? Getting exactly, yes, where are the cookies? Here they are. We said that the purpose of assessing formatively is to get feedback and guidance for improvement. So it can be feedback and guidance to make the cookies better. What needs to be changed in the way we bake them, in the recipe? These are decisions that we make during the process, not after the cookies are baked and served. If we are assessing the cookies summatively, the cookies are done, we're selling them, or we are offering them to our guests, and that's it. They may love them or they may hate them, but they're done. There isn't much that we can do, except for future reference. This works very well. I'm going to do it again in the same way. Oh, this didn't work so well. I will need to change some things next time. Your next question then might be, okay, I get it. I see how assessing cookies connects to assessing for academic purposes, but where are the rubrics? How about, I'm going to use the word rubric or scoring rubric. In British English, the term used is scoring rubric, but globally we use rubrics instead. And once again, my question is, and I would love your input now, what are rubrics? What is a scoring rubric? Or what do you think it is? Can you write it in the chat box? What is a scoring rubric? A chart, a set of criteria for assessment, a checklist. Criteria, this is the word that keeps coming up. Criteria, explanatory notes, definitions, documented proof. Right, yeah, great. Criteria, this is the descriptors. Checklist, ooh, yeah, criteria seems to be your favorite one. Goals to be achieved. Grid, because it may look like a grid. Measurement too, absolutely. Okay, let's look at the next slide, in which I have a working definition. Once again, there are lots of good definitions. I think this one works well for what I want to say next. And it will encompass the two main types of rubrics that we're going to look at now. In the survey, I had a true-false question about, it was, true-false, and it was about three types. And there are actually two main types. This is the first one. And the definition of rubric or scoring rubric will work well for both types. I'm using a definition by Heidi Andrade. I think it works well. Very simple. It's a scoring tool that lists the criteria, that was your favorite word in the chat box, for a piece of work or what counts. I like the idea of a piece of work because it can include cookies, video games, anything that we want to assess. This is the first type. I'm not going to tell you what it's called yet. I just want you to take a look at what it means. In this type, we can have, for example, 4 different categories. Ooh, horrible. I couldn't even eat one. Good. I had 1 and I enjoyed it. Very good. I had 2. My friends liked it too. And the top category or ranking level, delicious. I can't stop eating them until they're gone. They're amazing. They're yummy. This is one type of scoring rubric. How useful do you think this kind of rubric can be, whether it is about cookies or an oral presentation or anything else that we want to assess? Once again, in the chat box, and there are 2 different chat boxes. You have been using the main chat box for all these responses. The other chat box is for questions and answers, and we'll take care of that later. But right now, in the main chat box, how useful do you think that, oh, well, I'm already getting replies. Thank you. Too vague, very generic, absolutely. So it doesn't sound too positive. Quite generic, yes. Any other ideas? Oh, hi, Juan. I'm glad you finally joined. There seems to have been a problem. It may be motivating, but it's not very accurate. Absolutely. Oh, yes. And this also has, it's a good point. Somebody brought up the issue of self-esteem. You know, I mean, if we just tell you that the cookie you made is horrible or that it's delicious, it's something very emotional, very subjective. And thank you for all those great answers. How useful is this rubric when we want to encourage a baker, a student, somebody to improve? So let's look at the second type of rubrics in the next slide. And this one is a lot more specific. For type 1, you were saying, oh, well, it's not very accurate. It's very emotional. It has to do a lot with self-esteem. And once again, I want to go back to the question, and it's connected to what Annie said yesterday. For formative assessment, if the purpose is improvement, to get information, to get feedback for improvement, how useful is it? In this second type, we still have 4 categories. Instead of calling them yummy, delicious, or horrible, I'm calling them outstanding, very good, okay, or poor. And I have a list of criteria. That word that has been coming up ever since we started 20 minutes ago. So these are 4 different criteria that we could look at if we want to assess cookies. The number of chips, I'm talking about chocolate chip cookies, obviously, the color, the taste, the richness. Absolutely, it is more specific. This is what you're saying in the chat box. Yes, this is a lot more specific. It uses common terms. Thank you. It clearly highlights areas to work on. That's a key concept. What we can work on, what the baker can work on, what our students can work on. Poor doesn't sound positive. I agree. Now, the terms that we use, you will see that when I move later into academic products, rather than poor, I will use the term not yet. So I'm not going to read every single column, but just to get the idea of how the descriptors work, or needs improvements. Thank you, Lorena. Yes, that's another option. Instead of not yet, needs improvement. But needs improvement could also be for okay. These are all very subjective things. And the beauty of rubrics is that we, as teachers, can design and change the rubrics. Rubrics are always a work in progress. But for outstanding, let's say for outstanding, how do we know if it's an outstanding cookie, the best cookie ever? Well, because it's got a chip in every single bite. The color may be golden brown. It's not too brown, too black, too white. It tastes like a homemade cookie, and it's rich, creamy. So which of the two types do you, which of the two types do you feel that would help bakers or students to make improve? Absolutely, you're already saying number two, right? In the next slide, we will see the same rubrics now with the right definitions. The first type we looked at is a holistic rubric, while the second type is an analytic rubric. It has all those details that you can use for formative assessment. The feedback is more specific, and it gives the baker, it gives students, it gives learners the opportunity to change things and make it better. Great, okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for all those comments in the chat box. They keep coming in. Let's take a look at the next slide. Just in case you are now hitting the wall with all these ideas that we have been talking about and what you saw yesterday with Annie Altamirano when you were focusing specifically on formative assessment. So you may be wondering, okay, so these rubrics and the two types, the analytic rubrics and the holistic rubrics, do we use them in assessment for learning, as learning, of learning? And this is my perspective, and it's my opinion, and it's the way that I have been using them. Your feelings may be different, but this is where I stand. When it comes to assessment for learning, that is assessment for formative purposes, analytic rubrics work super well. The question may be, how do we design them? How do we use them? But not whether it's better to use analytic or holistic rubrics, because as you said, analytic rubrics give us details and ideas for improvement. When it comes to assessment as learning, which is another way to say self-assessment and reflection, then once again, my stance is that analytic rubrics work best. Once again, the question may be, how do we design them? How do we use them? But it's analytic rubrics seem to be the right answer. When it comes to assess exactly how to apply, how do we use them? That's the next thing we're going to be looking at. When it comes to assessment of learning or assessment for summative purposes, then the question is for all of us to consider and pick what is best in our situation. We may use analytic rubrics or we may use holistic rubrics. So the question is on not only how, the question is which. as you have been saying, yes, how do we do it? How do we apply them? I think if that is your question, I think that the first thing that we need to look at is the steps to create an effective analytic rubric. And that's what we will look at in the next slide. I have listed 3 simple steps to create an analytic rubric. The first step is to list the criteria to assess performance. And obviously, the criteria will depend on the subject and the activity. If we're talking about cookies, then I proposed we consider the number of chips, the color, the taste, and the richness. But if we're talking about an oral presentation, if we are assessing an oral presentation, then we're not looking at number of chips or color. We may be looking at the content. We may be looking at fluency, eye contact, whatever we decide that is important to consider. The second step is to determine the performance levels. Ideally, from 4 to 6 is a good number. In IB programs, for example, there are up to 8 levels, and that's okay too, but it's a little bit too much. The detail, who decides the criteria? Exactly, good question. Well, that's what we need to look at as teachers. We need to design the analytic rubrics considering where our learners are, age, language level, where we want them to get, those are the learning objectives or outcomes, and how to get there. These are all the things that we need to consider. For this second step, then, we need to determine these performance levels. As you can see, I'm not using the word poor, I'm using not yet, so the levels could be outstanding, proficient, approaching, not yet. Some teachers prefer the term excelling instead of outstanding. There are different ways in which we can express these levels. The third step is the one that really takes time and expertise, because it's the one in which we need to write a description for each performance level. And that forces us to think about what counts, as in the definition that we started off with by Heidi Andrade. How can we describe an outstanding level or a delicious level? Well, that also depends on the subject and the activity. If in the case of cookies, for example, we decided that there should be a chip in every bite, that it should be golden brown, that it should be homemade, it should taste like a homemade cookie, and that it should be creamy. These are things that we decided, or I decided, and I shared with you. Mouth-watering. Oh, that's a good word, Orlando. Thank you. So it melts in our mouth. That would be a description, probably, because we need to be as accurate as possible with the description to make the message clear, so that that feedback can be used for improvement. Oh, reverse engineering. That's an interesting suggestion in the chat box. Let's see if we can weave it in later. So let's look at the next slide, because you are now going to do something that I included in the survey. We're going to think about assessing pop bands. Some of you said that you were going to think about it. Some of you said in the survey that you had some ideas to share. And I want to use this other analogy in going from cookies to assessing pop bands because I think it makes the process of designing a rubric clearer. If we assess pop bands, what do we take into consideration? What are the different criteria that we can use to assess a pop band? Can you write your ideas in the chat box? Originality, music types, the genre. What else can we consider? What other criteria? Music quality, popularity, lyrics and composition, musical ability, performance. Those are, well, great. Creativity. We cannot possibly have all of those criteria listed, and they're all good. We will have to decide which criteria we want to focus on. And they keep coming. They keep coming. Thank you for all those criteria. Diversity, composition. Ooh, even
Hi everyone, we seem to have just lost Claudia for a second. Bear with us, I'm sure she'll be back just now. Keep putting your answers into the chat. How could we assess the pop band? Hi Claudia, you're back. Can you hear
yes,
me
I
okay?
am.
Great.
I'm sorry, was there a problem with the connection?
Yeah, you dipped in and out, but we can hear you clearly now.
All right. Okay,
Great.
thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So, thank you. So we're talking, let's see, we're all on the same page. We are talking about the different things, the different criteria that we can consider to assess a pop band. And I think that one of the things that I said that
Claudia dropped out again for you, Melissa.
Yeah, she has. Okay. All right, let's just wait a second to see if Claudia's internet connection comes back on. We can see lots of great answers in the chat, and I'll take this moment to say thanks everyone for your participation and patience. Hi Claudia, can you hear us?
yes, am
Great.
I back now?
Yes, you're back now.
I'm sorry about that. There
No
seems
problem.
to be all right, thank you. So I have read all of your comments, all of your criteria, and I think that the one thing that I want to make sure I say again, just in case it was lost, is that the most important thing is to choose some of those criteria. They're all great, but we can't have them all. Does that make sense? Is everybody following, and can everybody hear me well at this point? Melissa, are we all right?
Yeah, sounds great, Claudia.
Fantastic. So that's the most important thing. And all of your ideas are fantastic. We will have to only choose some. So let's move on to the next slide to look at the steps again. The first thing we need to do is to choose the criteria. You have listed a lot. We would just stick to 3 or 4. That's more than enough. The second step then is to decide on the performance levels. And then the last step, this is the one that is really time consuming and requires a lot of expertise, is writing the description for each of them. Does that make sense? Does it give you an idea how important it is to design the rubric and the analytic rubric and have all of these things in mind? But we are not musicians and we are not bakers, and this is not bake-off. So how does that apply to academic matters, to the teaching of English? Can we move on to the next slide to look at a very specific example. My proposal here is to look at oral presentations. And once again, I'm going to ask you to think about the criteria, then the 4 to 6, 4 will be fine, levels, and then we will think about the description for each of them. What are the criteria that you, content, I'm already getting them, thank you, performance, clarity, content, confidence, coherence, the use of body language, pronunciation, use of grammar, fluency, fantastic. As you can see, there are a lot of excellent criteria that we can consider. We just need to make sure we focus on some of them. Something that Annie mentioned yesterday several times about effective feedback is that it has to be manageable, specific but manageable. If we are looking at 10 different things, it's confusing. So let's look at grammatical resources, gestures, carrying the audience. I keep reading your comments. Thank you. In the next slide, we have exactly the same thing, but a little bit better organized. Instead of the number of chocolate chips or the color or the richness of the cookie, we have 3, 4 criteria like the ones that you have mentioned. Then we look at the 4 levels and we describe each with as many details as possible to turn it into effective feedback so that our learners can make changes while they are rehearsing, while they are preparing the oral presentation. Not at the end, because that would be a summative assessment. So here are some of my suggestions. In the next slide, you will see an analytic rubric that I have actually used in class. So is everything going well? Yes, fantastic. And I can see more comments coming in. So I think you haven't lost me again. These are my suggestions: content, fluency, eye contact. I have also chosen academic language. The 4 levels that I have used are outstanding, proficient, approaching, and not yet. And in the next slide, you will see a very specific description that I have used. In this case in particular, this is a scoring rubric that I have used with 11 to 14-year-olds. It's super important to make sure that the language is user-friendly. These are the terms that I have used, and I'm just going to give you a few seconds to look quickly at the different descriptions to see if there's something that resonates with you or something that you would later want to ask about. So just take a look, think, and take notes if needed. And there's a red light about this scoring rubric or any other scoring rubric. It's a work in progress. It's not the final answer. It's something that we can also continue to work on. It's something that can be improved. We can decide if we want to make it more qualitative than quantitative. Do we want to use specific numbers, like, for example, in the case of fluency, rather than say stumbles a few times, do we want to give an exact number? Do we want to make it qualitative? Is the stumbling something that interferes with communication. So this is a work in progress. That's the red light. The green light is that I think it's a useful tool that can be used in a number of contexts. It's useful for the teacher-student conference for feedback. It is useful for peer conferences. As Annie said yesterday, if our learners are not trained and do not have the tools to give effective feedback, it ends up being, it was nice. And this kind of analytic rubric gives specific details that we can use for effective feedback and that can be used for effective peer conferences. It is also a useful tool for self-assessment and reflection. It's more than a checklist because it's more specific. It has the 4 levels. It's something that I can use to self-assess my oral presentation while I'm working on it. It can be used as a summative tool too for summative purposes. And if we have been using it for formative assessment, then when we use it for summative assessment, it's just a question of checking the different boxes. So this is my proposal, going all the way from using analytic rubrics to assess cookies, to pop bands and oral presentations. In the next slide, what about the green light? Somebody's asking. Yes, what I mean by green light is that this is one of the great advantages of using such a tool. It's not perfect. It's a work in progress. We can make decisions and change it. But the great thing about it is that it's a good working tool. That's why it's a green light. So I would like to focus now on your takeaways and questions. I'm sure you have some questions, and I think Paul has been looking at questions more specifically. And I think that questions are also part of your takeaways. Your takeaways are what you take with you from my presentation, from our collaborative work. The questions that you may have now might be questions that we can answer, or more probably questions that you want to explore more in detail by reading more. And there are a few resources suggested in the handout that you will find for this presentation. You may want to experiment with some of these. You may want to try things collaboratively with other teachers. So all those questions are also part of your takeaways, I think. So I'll move on to the last slide, and then we can come back all together for the takeaways and the questions. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's my email address. You can absolutely contact me through the British Council. And I want to thank you for your active participation, because it was that constant feedback that kept the session going in spite of some technical issues. And we can now focus on your takeaways and some questions that you may have. Let's start off with the takeaways. In the chat box, can you type a few words on something that you take with you, something concrete, something specific that you can take with you, something that you have learned or thought about in this presentation? And thank you. Oh, details. Thank you, Juan. Thank you very much for all those nice messages. Consider if the rubric might be more quantitative or qualitative. The way I can design rubrics, the difference between analytic and holistic rubrics, the steps to create rubrics. Thank you, Banur. So these are all the things that you take with you. The levels of rubrics, fantastic. It's not so hard. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Designing a good rubric is not so hard. Great. Now that you have the steps, I hope you can use them. Thank you. The criteria for lovely. Thank you. Yes, Melissa, Paul, would you like to help us with questions that may be coming up?
Of course, Claudia. But first of all, let's just all say thank you to Claudia for such a really clear, a really entertaining presentation. And thanks to everyone for all your participation in the chat. It's clear that this is a topic that people want to talk about, isn't it? So let's go on to questions, Claudia, if that's okay with you. We're seeing lots of thank yous in the chat, but I have also seen some questions, and I think we'll go to one interesting question that kind of made me I started thinking about this as well. It comes from Cristina Gomez Castro, and she says, well, can we use the same analytic rubric for formative and summative assessment? And should we differentiate the timing, or are there any other differences if we use it for different stages in our semester, different stages in our class?
That's a fantastic question, and it brings up a debate. And I think it was Scrivener, not Jim Scrivener, Michael Scrivener. And I'm talking, I don't know, I'm going back to 1967 or 68, when the terms formative and summative were first used. I think that Scrivener used them in combination with the word evaluation. Now we call it assessment. Back then, Scrivener supported the idea that the only big difference between formative and summative purposes was when we do it.
Okay.
If we are doing it during the process, then it's formative. And obviously the purpose is improvement. When we're doing it at the end of the process, then it's summative. End of story, a fait accompli. And I said this is a debate because that's his point of view. Other specialists in assessment think that it's not the only difference. From my experience in the classroom, I would say that although almost everything can be used for formative or summative purposes, some tools seem to be a lot better for one or the other. For example, if we do brainstorming activities, that's great for formative assessment. I sometimes wonder, would it be fair to use brainstorming as a summative assessment? I don't think so. But even quizzes can be used for formative assessment. Even the same quiz that we're planning to use as a summative assessment could be used for formative purposes as long as it gives learners feedback, details for improvement. So going back to the rubrics, I think that analytic rubrics can be used both for formative and summative purposes. If we want a simpler way to use them, we can use them for the formative.
Oh, we might have lost Claudia there for a second. Let's see if she comes back. Well, anyway, I'll comment on what she was saying. I think that the teacher who asked that question and other teachers will be glad to hear that, because actually teachers have to do summative assessment and they have busy lives. So if the same rubric can be used for those two things, that would be great. Hi, Claudia, can you hear us again? We lost you
But
for a couple of
apparently
seconds.
the problem was with my end. So I hope I have been clear. I'm not sure
Yeah.
if you got it all. Okay, fantastic.
Yeah,
So,
I think we got to the end more or less of what you were saying. And I said, I think teachers will be glad to hear that answer, because if they can use the same rubric for formative and summative assessment, then it saves time in preparation for them. We will go to another question that came in from Facebook for the people that are watching there. Just check, Claudia, can you hear us? So one person from Facebook wants to know how we could adapt these for younger learners. I think they're thinking about primary learners.
Looks like we might have lost Claudia
Yeah, we might have.
again. What was the question? Let's put it out to the audience while it's
Yeah.
while we're waiting for Claudia.
Good plan. So if you're teaching primary and you want to use these rubrics, do you have any suggestions for how they could be simplified or made kind of more child friendly? Hi, Claudia, you're back.
You're on mute though, Claudia. Can't hear you. Need to unmute.
I had to come back in.
Hi, Claudia. Well, we used some crowdsourcing and we asked a question and people are actually writing answers. One of the questions was, how could we make a rubric like this even more child friendly, because someone teaches very young learners? And actually our wonderful participants are writing some answers just now. What do you think of their answers? They say smiley faces, pictures instead of words. Would you recommend that? Would you still use a rubric with primary?
Absolutely. And I would like to point out the work done by Gail Ellis and Sandy Morau using these tools and focusing on self-assessment and reflection, even for pre-primary learners. I am not a pre-primary specialist. I do primary, secondary, and tertiary, but I've seen the work that they have done and their research, and it's exactly what our participants have been saying. Using smiley faces, using fewer criteria, probably, yes, Sandy Morau and Gail Ellis. Gail is spelled G-A-I-L, yes. And they have done the research and have some amazing ideas connected with all those suggestions for even for pre-primary. Yes.
And I'll just take this moment to say that if anybody watching is specifically interested in primary, then come on Friday, because on Friday we have a session with Adrienne Slaspak about assessment for learning in the primary classroom. So she'll be able to give some ideas there. Anyway, Claudia, let's go back to some questions from the audience. We have a question about a teacher who is worried a little bit about, they want students to be involved in the stages of designing. Worried that it's too time consuming. Could you give any advice?
Yes, it's not only time consuming. I am a big advocate of including learners in all processes, but here is the debatable bit. Creating an analytic rubric requires a lot of expertise. So when it comes to video games, designing an analytic rubric for video games, our teenagers will probably be the experts and will probably be able to come up with what it takes, what counts. When it comes to cookies, young children will probably be able to come up with what it takes. When it comes to academic products, we are talking about things that take a long time to develop. So the challenge there is to involve our learners but to still be the one who has the expertise and can guide them to the final destination. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense, because I can see what that teacher is worried about the time, but then in fact we are the experts. We've done it before. We're going to be the guide. I guess you might have a skeleton plan, and you ask them to choose between some different parts, and they can be involved, but they're not actually writing out the table, are they?
Exactly.
Right.
Or what we can do, as I said, this is a work in progress. So after using, for example, the rubric for oral presentations, we can involve our learners by getting feedback from them on what helped them to actually work better on the oral presentation. And then they might have some very specific details to tweak. That's another way to involve them, but we are still giving them our expertise. These are the criteria that I would like to consider, and these are the descriptions. How does this work? How can we make it better?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Just one last question, and someone asks, you mentioned that you could make the rubric more qualitative. Sorry,
Qualitative,
I'll say that word, qualitative.
Yeah.
Do you mean that you would be writing more comments?
No, good question. Let me see if I can be clear with an example. When it comes to fluency, for example, if we say something that I included was, I think, stumbles a few times, stumbles all the time, that's quite quantitative. And we can make it even more accurate. 4 times, stumbled 5 times, stumbled 10 times. I don't know if that is very useful in this case in particular, but if it comes to academic language, we may want to include a quantity. There are at least 5 academic terms used in the presentation. But when it comes to stumbling to fluency, it might be better to use something that relates more to the quality. Stumbles, and then it interferes with meaning, it interferes with comprehension. So we're not counting, that would be the quantity, but all in all, in a more general or holistic way, the quality is good. It sounds like the message comes across clearly.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. And I've just noticed the time. So we're going to have to say goodbye to you, Claudia, and goodbye to our audience. But remember, everyone, this is number 2 in a series of 5 webinars this week on assessment. So come back and join us tomorrow for alternative assessment, the portfolio in writing, with Vasiliki Vlachou, a teacher who's working in Greece. And she's going to talk about portfolios, so she will kind of be taking some ideas that Claudia has talked about, and I'm sure talking about criteria and rubrics as well. So I'm seeing lots of thanks in the chat to you, Claudia. Thank you again. That was really great to have you. And I'll say thank you to Paul for supporting us here on Zoom, and to Sally and Marcus, who have supported us on Facebook, where there's also lots of people watching too. So everyone who's here on Zoom, the links will be sent to you, to your email, the one that you registered with, about 24 hours afterwards, the recording, your certificate, and the handout. So don't forget to take a look at the handout, full of lots of the ideas that Claudia has mentioned today. So have a great afternoon, everyone. Keep assessing those cookies. See you soon. Goodbye.